Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're really diving into something fascinating. How some people process language in a completely different way, and what happens when the education system just isn't set up to teach them effectively. We've got some excerpts from episode 31.pdf by Jamie Horrocks, PhD, and oh boy, this one really gets you thinking.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how this episode shines a light on Gestalt language processors. We call them GLPs for short. And, how their experience can be so different from the more common analytical language processors, or ALPs as we call them.
Right, and it all starts with Jamie, the author, talking about this ninth grader who was struggling to read, like really struggling, like even at a second grade level. And it turns out he's a GLP who had never been taught in a way that actually worked for him. Makes you wonder how often this happens, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's where understanding GLP versus ALP is really key. Imagine ALPs meticulously climbing a ladder, rung by rung, to reach that understanding.
Okay.
GLPs, they're taking the bird's eye view, grasping the whole picture almost instantly.
I like that. I like that visual a lot. But how does this actually play out when we're talking about something as complex as, language itself? I mean, the source material uses this analogy, Eliana's quest, to sort of break it all down.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Each step in Eliana's journey represents a different element of how we process language. And it all starts in the forest of semantics. This is where Eliana, she learns the meaning of words, like think dictionary definitions.
Right, but it's more than just knowing what words mean on their own, right?
Exactly. From there, she travels to the Valley of Phonetics. It's all about the sounds of language there. Think about the word unbreakable.
Okay.
It's made up of three distinct parts: un, break, and amable,
Right.
each one adding to the meaning. And those parts are called morphemes. They're like the building blocks of meaning.
Oh, okay. So it's like those word puzzles where you break down a big word into smaller ones.
Exactly.
This is making me think about how I learn language totally differently. I was all about phonics, like sounding things out step by step.
Which is a very ALP way to approach it.
Right.
Now, Eliana's journey continues to the mountains of morphology. That's where she tackles the actual structure of words. Like, how do prefixes and suffixes change a word's meaning?
Yeah.
It gets pretty intricate.
Right. Okay, so we've got meaning, sounds, and word structure. What's next on Eliana's little linguistic adventure? I mean, this is fascinating.
Next up is the peak of syntax. This is where grammar rules and,
Yeah.
sentence structure come into play. It's the difference between, like, the dog bit the man versus the man bit the dog.
Right.
Same words, totally different meaning, just based on the order. Right.
Yeah. It's like that game of telephone. One little change in the order of the words and the whole message just gets completely scrambled.
Exactly.
But Eliana's not done yet, right? She hits the swamp of acquisition next. What's lurking in there?
Oh, the swamp of acquisition. That's a good one. This is where the source material dives into the work of Stephen Krashen and his theories on, language acquisition. He argues that we don't learn language just by memorizing a bunch of rules.
Right.
We acquire it through exposure and, like, real interaction.
So less about textbooks and more about actually using the language.
Exactly.
That makes sense to me. It's like I can read about cooking all day, every day, but I'm not a chef until I'm actually in the kitchen making a mess and experimenting.
Precisely, yeah. And that's a key distinction when we think about how GLPs and ALPs might thrive in a learning environment. A GLP might struggle with, like, rote memorization or really rigid grammar rules, while an ALP might find comfort and structure in that.
It's like we all have different learning toolboxes. You might be great with a hammer, but I'm over here rocking a glue gun, still getting the job done just my own way. But the source material highlights how this difference in processing can actually have some serious consequences for GLPs, in the real world.
Absolutely. Because the education system often prioritizes, ALP learning styles, GLPs can really face some significant challenges. The source material calls this the autism tax.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. What exactly is the autism tax and what kind of impact does it have?
So the autism tax refers to that extra effort, energy, and resources that neurodivergent individuals, including many GLPs, have to expend to navigate a world that really isn't designed for them.
Right.
It's the constant adaptation, the code switching, the mental gymnastics required to fit into a system that doesn't quite understand how their brains work,
So it's not just about academics, right? It's about the emotional and the social toll as well. Imagine having to constantly translate yourself and your experiences to a world that almost speaks a different language, even if you're technically using the same words. It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Oh, absolutely. It's like being right-handed in a world designed for left-handed people.
Hmm.
You can adapt, but it takes constant effort and it can be incredibly frustrating. And sadly, the consequences can extend far beyond just frustration.
Yeah. The source material talks about misdiagnosis, that's incredibly concerning. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. So because GLPs learn and process information differently, they might be mislabeled as having learning disabilities or even, intellectual disabilities.
Wow.
And this happens because their strengths often lie in pattern recognition, holistic thinking, making connections. These are skills that traditional assessments often fail to capture.
So a student might be brilliant, seeing the world in this incredibly nuanced and interconnected way, but they struggle to demonstrate their knowledge in the way that's expected of them.
Exactly.
And that can have a devastating impact on their educational journey and their self-esteem.
For sure.
It's heartbreaking.
And the tragedy is that this misdiagnosis, it often stems from just a lack of awareness and understanding of different learning styles, not from any actual cognitive deficit.
Right.
These students aren't broken. They just need a different approach, a different set of tools to unlock their full potential.
This reminds me of something Jaime, the author, says in the source material. They mention feeling like they might be the only advocate, in all of Los Angeles fighting for these students. And it highlights how much work still needs to be done to raise awareness and create a more inclusive education system.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's a call to action for all of us. Yeah. Educators, parents, policymakers, to really recognize and celebrate the incredible diversity of learners and provide them with the support they need to thrive.
Yeah, it's like we're so busy trying to fit, square pegs into round holes, expecting them to conform to the system that doesn't even value their unique shape.
Hmm.
And that's where we have to step back and ask ourselves, what are we missing? What are we overlooking when we prioritize, one way of learning over another?
Exactly. And that's really where Jeannie's work becomes so crucial. They're not just highlighting a problem, they're offering solutions. In the source material, they talk about developing specific teaching methods that are actually designed to support GLPs in the classroom.
So instead of trying to change these kids, it's about changing the system to support them. What kind of difference does that make?
Oh, it's transformative. When GLPs are taught in a way that aligns with their strengths, using things like visual aids, storytelling, hands-on activities, they can really excel. They often have exceptional memories, this real knack for seeing connections that other people just miss, and this amazing capacity for deep intuitive understanding.
It's like unlocking a hidden superpower. But it makes you wonder how many Elianas are out there right now struggling in a system that just doesn't recognize their brilliance.
That's the question that keeps me up at night, honestly. We need more advocates, more educators, more parents who understand the needs of these GLPs and are willing to fight for their right to a truly equitable education.
Yeah. It's about shifting that narrative from deficit to difference, right?
Exactly.
These kids aren't broken. They're just wired differently. And when we can finally embrace that difference, we open up this whole world of possibilities, not just for them, but for all of us.
Absolutely, because when we can create a more inclusive world, when we really value those diverse ways of thinking and learning, you know what? Everybody benefits from that.
Wow. This deep dive has really, really opened my eyes. It's given me a whole new perspective on language learning and honestly just the incredible potential that exists within each of us. What about you? What stood out to you from all this? It makes you kind of stop and think about how we can all become better advocates for the Elianas in our own lives. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep learning, keep challenging that status quo.